that shit on me. 'Cause I still can't sleep without medication, and I let my thoughts run wild while I still think I got one, and I care too much about my reputation, and I'm tired of sleeping on this floor.
Hey everyone, Anthony here with Interviews with Everyday People. You may notice this man to my left again. This is the second time, but we kicked the kids out this time through.
We sure did.
Yeah, we got rid of
It's
Eddie.
only you and me, man.
It's only me and you. Speaking of the kids, we're in Keith's old room, right?
That's right.
Yeah,
Keith,
so
Keith Collins, make that known.
Keith Collins, yeah. Well, if people don't know you and know the Collins, then they're on the wrong platform. But yeah, we're in Keith's old room. Keith, I can definitely tell you're never moving back in. It's taken over. Yeah, you're not welcome.
It's been too long. I'm sorry, son. We'll find a place to sell her. We'll make it happen.
Yeah. But this is fantastic. So this is my first time in the. You've coined this the vault, right?
The vinyl vaults.
The vinyl vaults. This is unbelievable. I have so many questions because there's a lot of this. This is a style of music that was beyond me. I was a cassette CD kid, so
no kidding.
Yeah, I own vinyls.
We're going to educate you in this episode, man.
Exactly. That's what I'm hoping for. Like when you were kind of playing here, I don't even know how to pick a song on a vinyl. So
you've never dropped a needle?
Never.
Maybe later on I'll give you a privilege.
Yeah, I've never done it. Like I own a handful of vinyls. I like the artwork on the vinyl. Right, so I like where it, like my favorite looking is Abbey Road. It's a great looking album with them walking down the street, and I'm a big fan of, is it Zeppelin 2 or Zeppelin 1 with the Stairway to Heaven?
That would have been the So-So.
Yeah, with the wizard and stuff.
Right,
yeah, I like that. So I own those two albums. The third album I want to own is the one with the baby with the mom tattoo smoking a cigarette from Van Halen.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I always liked that one. And then the Motley Crue, where they're all in drag, and like the Brady Bunch.
So you love album cover art.
Yeah, I'm an art guy. I like the art. That's the same way like I buy my beer. Like if it has a cool little drawing on it, or like I went to a show last night in Strikers, and the one band just had a really cool T-shirt, and it had like an alien ripping apart a city, and I was like, I'm buying that.
Well, later on we'll take you in the album.
Yeah,
Vinyl Vault, and we'll talk a little bit about album covers and art and different things like that. You got a deep appreciation for it. That's what made it happen with with albums. You had the record, which was great. The audio part of it, but you also had the visual with the cover. The backside had liner notes, lyrics, all kinds of stuff like that. So
I was a big lyric book guy.
Process.
Yeah, so like I do miss the art of a CD or something like that because I used to buy a CD, open it, look at the lyrics, and I would sing along with the lyrics.
If you didn't have bifocals, you couldn't read it.
Yeah, yeah, they were very small. But I do like that the vinyl is coming back, and it is really neat that like how much it has come back. Like vinyl sales are killing CD sales.
Well, something I've always said that vinyl has never left. I mean, everybody says there's a vinyl boom, there's this, there's that, but to me, it's always been here. It's a different perspective. I mean, I've been in vinyl since 1961, so it's been a very big part of the fabric of my life. But there is it's great to see that. Matter of fact, I think about 10 years ago, Eddie was going to a lot of concerts, a lot of shows, and bringing home vinyl, and it really threw up the red flag.
Yeah,
this stuff's coming back in a big way.
100%. Yeah, and he. Speaking of Eddie, the other vinyls I own are the Crowbot ones, and because of the art. I mean, Bishop's art on it is fantastic.
Oh, it's out of this world, man.
Yeah, so I do like the visual of those. But we jumped a little bit ahead. So if you do like what you hear, we do have all the links to everything below. So we're going to get into a lot with Eddie here. With different YouTube channels you can check out to see more of him. The collection at the very end of this interview, we're going to do a brief interview. It might be one of our shorter ones. But after the show interview's over, we're going to do a complete walkthrough of this whole collection, which is
we'll call it complex.
Yeah, the complex.
We got the hallway, we've got the 45 vinyl vault, we've got the LP room, which has pop culture and a lot of other stuff in there. So we've got a lot to cover.
There's a lot of cool stuff, and then I will be behind the camera, and it will just be the Eddie Show, giving us a tour and showing us around.
I'm fine with that.
It is absolutely beautiful. It's a cool experience. You guys are going to definitely love it. But yeah, so how did this collection start?
Actually, it started, I would say, 1961, Christmas time. Like we all as we're young kids, we get all these gifts, and we want cars, we want toys, and all this stuff. And it was the same for me back then. But there was one gift that was given to me by my uncle, Father Jim Trucker, who was also a disc jockey and different things. We'll talk a little about him as we go through things here. But I received a gift which was a large box and wrapped very nicely. I opened it up, and I could read very well at that time, at 4 years of age, So inside the box, after I took the wrapping over, was this box, and on the front it had two knobs on it. One said volume, and the other one said tone. And then on the sides was some hinges, gold hinges, and I took it, I pulled them down, pulled the top up, and here it was a record player. 3-speed record player, 45. I played 45, 33, and also 78s.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was the inspiration. That was the fuel on the fire. I got a stack of records that came with it. My uncle was very big at the time as a booking agent. He knew all the promotion people was getting records and things, so he put a nice stack of records in there for the kid. And I'll never forget some of the records that were in that stack. Ram-a-Lam-a Ding Dong by the Edsels on the Twin label. We had Nag by the Halos. These are all songs from 1961, And then there was some oddball stuff, which became later the passion for me to collect records, was the songs that nobody knew about or maybe sold very minimal copies, got little airplay. There was a song by the Jotamars on Capitol Records called Cloud 99, and the flip side was called Later. It was like a Bill Haley thing, Later, L-A-T-E-R spells later, So I'm 4 years old, and I come home, I would, listen to these records the next year. Excuse me, sir.
That's what happens.
I would come home from school when I was in first grade, and there was a daily ritual. I would come home and get my record player out and play my records. And the more you play the A sides, then you play the B sides, then it got more intense because I would take a record and I would look at that. And it's like a particular record like this. We'll talk about this a little bit later too. But I would look at a record and analyze it, not just for the sounds, but what was on that particular record label itself, the label. Say this is Herald Records. Well, gosh, Herald Records, and they're from New York. Then I would see the producers on the bottom, maybe be Lieber and Stoller or Johnny Madara and Dave White, and got to recognize these names. And I would see addresses on them, 1650 Broadway or a place in Philadelphia. So all this information that was on these 45s, that's what became the passion to start collecting. Because with me, it wasn't about one genre of music. I didn't just like, top 40 rock and roll or doo-wop or whatever it might have been. I liked crooners. I liked Perry Como. It was all over the place. So my collecting tastes were very broad. Mm-hmm. And by seeing all this information, anytime when I would see a record associated with that, I would see maybe John Madara's name and say, wow, it's going to be a good record. So I would buy it automatically. And say a group like Danny and the Juniors, who became good friends of mine in later years. I performed with them. I almost went on tour with them. I got their first record in 1964. My uncle had given to me. It was called Let's Go Skiing. It went to number 93 on the Billboard Hot 100. Didn't do nothing,
Yeah.
But that record put such an imprint on me. I loved what their vocal sound was. I had that. They already had At the Hop, which was their first hit record in 1957. So now I was on a mission to find all the records by Danny and the Juniors. So this is how the pieces of the pie come. Mm-hmm. And that's it, starting at 4 or 5 years old, my first records, were given to me. But then it got a little wide scope in around 1966. My uncle went into radio and started at WYNS in Lehighton, Pennsylvania. And on Sundays, like when you're a disc jockey, you've got to work during the week, but you also have to work on the weekend too. Mm-hmm. So when you get stuck on a Sunday, it's a little rough. So he would take my brother and myself to the radio station. Okay, it's like a kid in the candy shop.
Yeah, you're looking through all of them.
We'd be driving up to WYNS. It was just like watching American Graffiti with Wolfman Jack, out in the boonies and that big tower at this radio station. Nobody's there. Same situation. We'd be driving up this windy road. It's almost like those roads in Paris where they're, almost off the cliff and that type of thing. But we'd get up to the station, and while he would be on the air, he would let us go into one of the rooms where all the records were stored that came in for the week. Now, you got to remember, this is 1966. There's a lot of music going on. The British invasion was going on. Every kid on the block was releasing a record independently. So you had major labels, you had independent labels. So the radio stations were getting flooded. Like a couple hundred records a week they were being sent. You've got a top 40 list. There's 40 records going on there, maybe, and an extra, for a power charge or something, pick it of the week. But all these records would be just dumped. They're not going to go on the airwaves. So what we would do, my brother and I, primarily me, would go into these big boxes. They were like the size of dryer or washer boxes, and they would be filled with records. So we would take these records out, we'd sit in a room, and we'd go through them. Now, you're probably saying, what did you take, or how did you know how to take those records? The insight of that was that I was pretty savvy. My uncle always gave me a copy of Billboard magazine, weekly and stuff. So I would read that magazine. It was like the Bible, man, because it was chock full of information not only about the records that were on the charts, records that were coming up the charts, which were more important to me. The records that were not making it, the artists that maybe were coming out, the promoters, different songs that the record labels were pushing. They had big trade ads, this week with a bullet, type of thing like that. So I would be soaking up all this information. Number two, I was watching TV a lot. American Bandstand, of course. Loved Dick Clark. Rate a record. He would always take a record that was on the move, maybe not so much, and let the kids dance to it. And I think it's good, Dick. I can dance to it. It's a mover. I'll give it a 55. But a lot of those records went by the wayside. So I would watch Bandstand. I would watch TV shows like Shindig, Hullabaloo, Lloyd Thaxton, all these groups that were on there that maybe people didn't know about. And like I said before, the record labels. There was a very, matter of fact, if we look, we could see right across from me here, there's a record by the Foundations called Baby Now That I Found You. That's on the Uni label. Bright label, right? But they released a lot of psychedelic records. Strawberry Alarm Clock was probably one of their biggest hits at the time, Incense and Peppermints, which to me kind of signals the beginning of the psychedelic era. I mean, face it, Incense and Peppermints, what were they talking about? Hiding the smell of pot, the incense and the peppermints, right? But Uni Records had a knack for taking a chance on a lot of these groups. The Druids of Stone Age, Giant Crab was another group that was on there. So anytime I would see anything on the Uni label, I automatically pulled it.
Yeah, that was going to be my question for you. Like, did you end up finding more of like, hey, if I see something with Herald or Uni, or if I see it came from this address, I know that this studio produces a certain sound I like, or that producer.
True. Very true. Yeah.
So you would be turned on to a band more or less by where it was produced, more or less, like, because I
would say more, but very that would be one facet of it. So many different different things. So these are the way that I would be collecting records. I'm taking all these stuff, and so what my brother and I, we'd leave. We'd have stacks of records like this. Maybe 2 stacks. Take them home. We put them on we'd walk into the house. We lived in Hazleton, and we had a big long, like a buffet type of table, big long thing, and we would pop the stacks of the records on there. Okay, my uncle never looked through those records and said that he wanted to see them first before we took them. Never. I mean, there was incredible stuff, picture sleeves and things that are still in my collection, after, I'm 60-some years now, whatever. And the one time he said, can I go through that stack of records? So he went through the stack of records, and he pulls out one. He says, you can't have this. What was it? It was We Ain't Got Nothing Yet by the Blues Magoos on the Mercury label. And the reason that he kept it was because he felt that WYNS was going to add it next week.
I was gonna say.
And I was bummed, man, because I love that song. I mean, it was, and I heard it like on on one of the TV shows. I think that's why I took it. But that's how smart I was. Eventually, I got a copy of the record.
Yeah.
Okay.
Once it wasn't on the rotation anymore.
Right. Yeah. But that's what happened. So many records that might get played by the radio station and they weren't going to, keep it in the library or whatever because it just didn't make it. It didn't take off. They didn't get the phone calls for it. They didn't sell it to stores because what the record radio stations would do to make their playlist, they would check nationally what was going on in different surveys, Billboard and Cashbox and stuff. But they would also more tune into what was happening in the area. They would actually call the local record stores to say, what's your hottest songs this week and that. And that's how you put together. Because I used to be a music director for a radio station. Mm-hmm. We would tally it up, and that's how we would formulate what record's number 1 this week, number 2, and so forth.
Yeah,
like that.
Now, did you ever have a situation where you took a record and it was something that you thought you caught it was trending before it trended, and maybe it wasn't like the hit, but maybe the second song on this album was the one that took off. And did he ever
many times?
Yo, I need that one back. It's getting in the rotation.
No, I never went through that situation. But you talk about that, and let's go back to the year 1966. Once again, psychedelia, all this stuff. There was a record called Psychotic Reaction by a group called the Count Five, very big top 10 record, and I didn't have that first. Mm-hmm. But the record that I got was Peace of Mind, which was the follow-up, because it was not being played in the box. And the sweetness of it all is that the records that did not make the charts or got minimal airplay, or maybe there was only so many thousand press or whatever, those are the records that are in demand because they didn't make it, they didn't get the sales. Mm-hmm. So they're harder to find. You know, it's that's the thing I can look back on. You know, being a kid and collecting records, you know, seriously by the time I was 9, 10 years old, is that I had the insight, I had the smarts.
Yeah.
You know, to get those records that we needed, not the ones that sold, you know, heavily. And a funny story, you know, as far as collecting records, I was getting a little bit older. I'd say about 1970, I think around 1971, around 14. Kids at school all knew I collected records. You know, it was just, you know, Eddie's the record man, he's the record man. So I would, you know, hang out with a lot of kids. We'd go to their houses, you know, after school or later on, you know, on the weekend or something like that. And I remember very specifically going to this one kid's house, and he says, Eddie, he said, my dad's got a whole bunch of records up in the attic. You want to go take a look? And I'm like, holy moly, let's go. You know, heck with the, you know, whatever we're doing outside, let's go up in the attic. So we go up in the attic, and it was a very small, you know, pitch type of attic. And there's a couple, you know, cardboard boxes. So Eddie starts going through them. And I'm like, oh, baby, you know. And I'm seeing things that I had never saw before that I didn't have. Maybe they weren't ultra rare, but I'm finding like the platters on the Maroon Mercury label. You'll never know. And all these doo-wop records and stuff. And the kid goes, did you want any of these? I said, well, heck yeah. He said, well, my dad said, take them all. So this is how I would find records.
Yeah.
You know? But the other beauty of collecting was that, and I want to say beauty, but at first it was a hardship because you thought you were the only one doing this stuff. You know, my buddies would be out trading baseball cards and stuff like that, and I'm collecting records. And I didn't know anybody that really collected records. It was really a closet type of situation because I'm sure there were people out there, but you didn't.
Probably not your age,
It wasn't on the market. It wasn't widespread, you know, in the type of situation. So we didn't have collectors clubs. We didn't have record shows where you could go, you know, to meet people that were doing the same thing as you. So you were kind of by yourself, you know. And then how do you get these records? You didn't have eBay. The record stores were kind of minimal. When the listing booth came in, that was kind of cool. You know, you could pick up some stuff, some first pressings. I remember going in the listing booth when they opened up in Hazleton in 1974. I bought Tell Her Known by the Zombies and a couple other singles, first presses. I remember all that. But what also was happening at the same time, mail order was getting very big.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say extremely big, but it was a known thing. So when I knew that there were places where you could order records from, I started ordering all the catalogs. Matter of fact, let me show you something here. This is a record catalog I ordered in 1972 from Record Museum in Philadelphia.
Holy crap.
Okay, the envelope and everything. It says there it is, 325.72. Okay. This is how the kid was so hot. So this is the mail order. And you could tell how much time I spent with this catalog.
Yeah,
you were tattered as man. I put it together. There's still the paper clips from 72. That's when I wore it out. But they would have a list of all the records that were available from that store. Now, mind you...
No pictures, by the way.
No. Now, mind you, a lot of records were re-released, maybe on the same label.
Can I look at it quick?
Yeah, sure. Like on Phillies Records or something, but it might be a second pressing or whatever.
I'm just going to see if any of them jump off the page at me here.
Yeah. Okay. And then what I would do, the ones that I did not have, that I really wanted, I would start putting dots on them.
So the first one I see
I'm sorry, the ones that I had already, I would put dots on them. I had them, and then there was other ones that I really anticipated getting.
So the first one that I looked at as soon as I opened it, Chipmunks, Alvin Harmonica, and the Chipmunk Song, and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
That's a must every Christmas, man. Yeah.
Yep, that's the first one that just popped in my head here.
Uh-huh.
Oh, man.
Anything else jump out?
Chubby Checker, obviously, that's a big one.
The Twist on Parkway Records, yeah. But that's just a little sample.
This is unbelievable.
I would send away for any catalog that I heard about, but this is my first.
I don't want to bump the mic.
And that was the Record Museum in Philadelphia, very well known, probably one of the
what year is
record
this?
stores. That was 1972.
72.
That catalog there, yeah.
Wow, this is
As a matter
crazy.
of fact, here's an envelope I was going to send for another one. I never got the chance to put the stamp on it.
Man, you keep everything. All the Beatles. Holy crap, they had a lot. What was a red dot that you owned it?
Let's see. Let's check that out. This is good. I like this. Yeah, the red dots were, of course, I had all the Beatles records by then, man. Yeah. And Beach Boys and that stuff.
Now, when you see back in during times where when Lennon said I'm bigger than Jesus, and they started breaking and burning all the vinyls.
Yeah, that was all taken out of context. As a kid, 1966, I was 9 years old, and I remember very vividly. I think it was around spring or summer when all this transpired. And you've seen all this stuff on the news evolving, and the imprint was so heavy when this was said, because they totally took it. What Lennon meant was that, Jesus Christ the Savior, the Beatles, that people are worshiping the Beatles as much. It was just, and he only said it because he was upset about that fact. Yeah. That there was just too much going. That's why they decided to get off the road and stop touring and go into the studio more. People were just anything the Beatles did, anything the Beatles. They went to a hotel room. The maids would cut up all the sheets, and go and sell them, make money. It was crazy. I lived through all that stuff. But that was a crazy time. You watch the TV show. Next thing you know, there's bonfires and there's disc jockeys. And here we are, so-and-so. And we have got the Beatles albums. And what do you think, Joe? Oh, I think these Beatles have got to go. And so they're putting the Beatles albums into the fire. The kids are coming over. They're bringing all their Beatle records. And even stations were saying that, bring your Beatle records tonight. It's like, it was crazy. It was uncalled for.
Yeah. And a lot of it, too, they were just super bored with interviews because they would get asked the same questions over. And so they would start poking fun at the people interviewing them.
I grew up in that whole era, and I remember it so vividly. I was living in Philadelphia, and can you imagine Philadelphia, one of the biggest rock and roll metropolises of the world? All this stuff is happening. Summer of '64, the Beatles were going to play the convention center, and all this, was happening. And I can recall very much. I got so many things I could talk about the Beatles, but in March of 1964 specifically, I was with my uncle, and I was going somewhere. I think it was Gimbel's department store or something. He parked the car. He went out to do something, and I was in the car listening to the radio, WIBG in Philly with high lit, and he played nonstop 5 consecutive Beatle records in a row. You've never heard that in your life again. Mm-hmm. That was the impact. It was the whole charm of they set the trends in music, they set the trends in fashion, social awareness. Mm-hmm. It was just crazy. But to see all that, later on we'll maybe take a spin. I'll show a couple of the Beatle things of mine and whatnot.
Yeah. So when this collection first started, you said it started in your bedroom, and then from the bedroom it moved when you buy this house, and now you're starting a family and stuff. Where did this?
Well, there was no stop. I mean, it's just like an addiction.
Mm-hmm.
One time there was a disc jockey who, Bobby B, very lovely guy, good friend of mine, cool Bobby B, Bob Bachman. He introduced me at a show for Broadcast Pioneers. I sing in Philadelphia quite regularly. And when I was coming up on stage, he says, Eddie was born with a photograph needle in his arm.
Yeah, you're very photographic. You have a photographic memory.
That's what happened. It's an addiction, like anything else, food, whatever. Once you start with this record collecting, there's not nonstop, especially if you're a person like me, where you're not collecting one genre of music, one specific artist. There are record collectors that collect one label. That they got to have this label. Then and they call them label runs. And this and that. But for me, it was everything. So, I had all these what I would say hookups. The radio station was good. Then I used to. Because of my wealth of knowledge, I knew they used to give records away on the radio. So I would listen to contests. And I would win all the time. Matter of fact, I was banned. From WAZL, AM 15 in Hazleton.
For winning too many times.
For winning too many times. They never had these rules set as from my radio experience, we would have where you could not win like within 30 days. If you won once, that's it. You spare the wealth, But old Eddie, man, I was called every week. I knew these tunes, baby, or whatever questions they were asking about the artist.
Changing your voice.
They actually
send your buddy to go pick up the prize.
And God love him, Neil Rodino was the disc jockey. He had a show called Closet of Classics, and I used to win all the time. And matter of fact, probably a couple of months ago, I just found a tape of mine because I used to. If I won, I go get my tape recorder to my radio, and the DJ would be on there. And we have a winner, Eddie Collins of Hemlock Street, So I would tape this, right? And I just found one of those a couple weeks ago. I was awesome. Rolling, And the funny thing is that he says, Eddie, Eddie was our winner, but Eddie said tonight to give it to somebody else. But I can remember the records I won. It's crazy.
And you still have all those?
I still have them. The first record I won was in the summer of 1967 on WAZL, a Saturday show. I can't remember the name of it. Neil's was the Closet of Classics, but Bobby Day was on. He was the jock on the air. And I won a copy of Ed Hurst's Dance Party. And it had all these songs that I loved, but I didn't have the 45s, which was great. And that was another way to get... to accumulate. That was the album side, to get songs that you didn't have, on these compilations, so to speak, albums. But I was always after, the records. Garage sale started for me in 1972. I was around 15, and I recall the first garage sale I went to, Putnam Street. I seen it in the newspaper, so I went over, and they didn't say records in the newspaper, so I went over I seen garage sale, so and it was a couple blocks from my house, so I go over to the garage, and I'm forward. Hey, mister, you have any records? Oh, come over here, kid. I think I got some in the box. And I opened the box. I nearly fainted. Because, first of all, it was a stack of records. There was no sleevers on them. That's a no-no to begin with. But the upswing of it is that they were all mint condition. And they were great records that I didn't have. Believe What You Say by Ricky Nelson, Endless Sleep, Jody Reynolds. It goes on and on. It's amazing how I can remember where I bought these records.
Yeah, it's insane.
But that was it. The trend. We didn't have, like I said, we didn't have the stores. We didn't have the collectors that were one-on-one later on. Excuse me. We had, like you call swap meets, stuff like that, record collector shows. And eventually later on, in recent years, I was the vice president for Keystone Record Collectors in Lancaster. And they are, matter of fact, right now in their 40th year of running. And they were the ones that kind of spearheaded a lot of the shows years ago. They have around 300 or 400 members, and we would have a big show at a certain facility, like in the Lancaster area, every month or whatever. But that was a place where you could go. You would have 50 vendors with all vinyl. So you have opportunity to buy these records you're looking for, you know. But like I said, as a kid, there was just like nothing out there.
Yeah. Now, what is the difference between a 45 and a vinyl?
Well, 45 is vinyl.
Well, I mean, for 45 size, like this, are these the 45s or what are these?
That's a 45.
Yeah, and then the big vinyl, like
right.
the big.
Well, it's spinning at 45 RPM revolutions per minute. The 33 is the album.
Okay.
And there's 78, which was the start of it all, like from basically the Victrola era, the early 1900s and stuff like that, to 1949. 1949 is when I think it was January 10th that RCA, or March 10th rather, that RCA had introduced the first 45 RPM record player. Matter of fact, that's one of them up there. I forget the model number of it, but that's the first RCA Bakelite. Was made out of like a plastic, and if you dropped it, man, it'd shatter all over the place. Matter of fact, my aunt had given us one of those, and it was on a bunk bed. And the thing went down the floor, whammo! It was no more. I bought that one back in 1983. Yeah.
What drives you more to the 45s than the other ones?
Well, it's kind of like I said before, and it's also convenience and everything but it's mainly, and a lot of people tell you the same thing. There's a certain charm about a 45, and that's what drew it to me. That was my whole thing, starting as a kid all the way till now. I still love the 45s. We'll talk later on.
Can you put a full album on a 45?
No, actually, you can put a couple of songs. They used to call what they're called EPs, extended play.
Okay,
and they became popular probably in the late 50s, early 60s. Elvis and different artists would put they'd have 3 songs on it. And the way they would do that, there was a reason for it. They would put say three songs on each side, kind of like a sampler to get you to buy the album.
Yeah, you're double dipping.
Yeah. And so, they're making the money off of that, and then they're driving you to the store. Well, this is good. I'm going to buy the album.
And then they would sell singles as well, too, right?
Yeah. So that was the basis of that.
That's cool. Now, is that like a flip side thing, too? Like if you flip, is there anything on the other side, or just only one-sided records?
No, well, these are 40. Basically, they're pressed. They have an A side, a B side, kind of a thing like that. Usually, the premise was that the artist would go to the studio or whatever. They might do a handful of songs, but the song that they figured was going to chart and do well, that would be the A side, and they put something lesser on the backside. They didn't want to put two, A records. Maybe they had 4 records and songs in the can, but that would be maybe the second release to follow it up or whatever. But sometimes it's funny you ask about that, because a lot of the disc jockeys, would take and a lot of times listen to both sides of the record, and then they would say, well, wow, the other side is great, or it's even better. And there were songs that started as A-side that became B-sides.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
simple fact is, here's one for you, Maggie May by Rod Stewart. Yeah. Incidentally.
They didn't want to put that out there.
The A-side was slated as Reason to Believe. And the reason I say this about this record is because a friend of mine did all the mandolin edits on Maggie May. His name is Jay Lear. And he was the artist and repertoire A&R guy with Mercury Records back in the early 1970s, and they gave him certain projects to work on, working on different compilations and different things with different, besides producing or whatever. But it came to his attention that there was a new artist going to be signed with Mercury in 1970 named Rod Stewart. So with that, he was assigned to the project, and they had given him the songs. And here, the one that Mercury had talked about was this Maggie May. And the darn thing was probably about seven minutes long. It's a funny story. So Jay told me, he said, what I had to do, Eddie, I had to trim that down so we could put it on the air. Because back in 1971, you could start stretching, because normally the records were under 3 minutes long until Hey Jude came, and MacArthur Park, which was 7 minutes and 20 seconds. MacArthur Park by Richard Harris in 1968. But the records, were always short. So he had to get it down to an airable time, which I think it came out to 5 minutes and 1 second or 2 seconds. But he said, Eddie, what I had to do was trim all those mandolin edits down. He said, if you listen to that intro and the middle of it, you can't tell. But I know there's 12 edits in there. He said, every time when I would, work on an edit and do something or whatever, he said, I would take it back to my boss, Charlie Falk. Charlie would send it over to Rod at the Castle, and the first thing Rod would say, who is with my tune? He's messing it up, man. He's messing it up. But he said, when it was all said and done, the radio stations across the country started playing Reason to Believe. They said, we're putting Reason to Believe. He said, no, Maggie May's the hit. They wouldn't listen to him, the executives of Mercury Records, okay? So they put out Reason to Believe, a Tim Hardin song. It was written by Tim Hardin. And they put it out, and it's starting to sell, but it's lukewarm. It's not doing nothing. And so Mercury Records has another, meeting with the brass, and Jay Lear is adamant about it. He said, I'm telling you, he said, they're got to be playing, Maggie May. So all of a sudden, some of these guys were starting to flip the record over, and they realized that Maggie May was the side. Next thing you know, boom, number one. So that's what you say. Yeah, it's like, A-side, B-side type of thing. And sometimes the B-sides became the A-side.
Yeah. Now, another cool thing about your collection up here, going through and seeing everything, obviously you have just immense pop culture references. I mean, there's Batman, the Raisinets, there's Dukes of Hazzard,
right?
Cheers.
And right now our viewers are only getting a one-sided view that goes around the room.
You'll see this whole thing. It's unbelievable. There's vinyls on the wall. There's T-shirts on the wall. But the thing that I like the most, and because of obviously my interest in local music, is you have a section literally dedicated to all Pennsylvania artists.
Oh, that's correct. Let me grab a couple.
Yeah. Okay, he has. I'll just talk a little while you go. So he has it broken down by like the city. So like stuff like I'm from Monty City. He was showing me artists from Monty City I've never heard of. Artists from Frackville, Tamaqua, Pottsville, the Harrisburg area. The whole it's just so many cool historic. Some of these are super super old. It's really really neat. But so not only does his passion for music stretch to worldwide, nationwide, but he's focusing on local history as well.
Which you can see behind me is a cabinet where it's got about 500, I call it local and regional artists from everywhere. Northeast Pennsylvania, Central Pennsylvania, Hazleton, Lancaster, Reading, all over the place. Yeah. But this is a stack from the Hazleton, or not the Hazleton, Pottsville area. Yeah. I got the other side from Minersville. The Society, they were from Minersville as well. Yankee Rebels out of Schuylkill Haven. The Counts, a lot of people know DJ Dan Paletti. Yes, Dan was a rock and roll star for about a day. He had a record by The Counts. They were a big label called Kingston, which released a lot of local records. Now, mind you, too, all these records were pressed in limited quantities, so they're not out there.
Yeah.
That's what makes it harder, and it's more sought after, and it's more of a challenge, for the collector. Kings and Queens, Donnie and I, and his daughter Sandy and Donna. Our good buddy, Cousin Dave, Cantwell.
That's
Truck Shop, Love Trout.
Yeah, Truck Shop. Yep.
Yeah. The Sullivans, they were from around here as well. That's a polka record. Wayne and the Impressions. Wayne has, I think it was the home flooring place down in 61. I can't remember the name. I'm sorry about that. But heck of a nice guy. Wayne, he autographed it as well. Big thing is anytime I know an artist or I'm going to take a record to somebody, it gets autographed, of course.
Yep.
But Little Andy Polka Orchestra, Jimmy Dranis was on this one. And Jimmy plays with Another Side now.
Yep.
Fat Cats, of course. But on and on. Backstreet, great record from 1976. Sounds like it came out in 66. Matter of fact, somebody had an argument with me one time. And they asked me if I knew about this record. And I said, yeah. I said, it came out in 1976. No, listen to it. I said, 1970. I know the guys. So the group calls Backstreet from Tremont. And as we go on here, Les Brown, of course, and his band of renown. Big band
that's a cool
man.
That's a cool, like the Columbia.
And Les Brown was from near Tower City, Reinerton.
Where would these be like recorded and put on vinyl at locally, or would they have to go to like Philly or something?
It depended. It depended upon the I guess the artist, producer, the label, whatever, what kind of funds that they had. If they could go into a good studio, a lot of times they couldn't. There was a gentleman out of Origsburg, I think his name was, because I learned about a lot of things that happened here in Schuylkill County after I moved down here in 74. I knew a lot about Northeast rock and roll, Hazleton, Wilkes-Barre, and all that. But when I came down here, I got an education as well. I knew of some of the records that were on the Barclay label and things like that. And a gentleman by the name of Clay Barclay. He was a young kid, had a lot of smarts, and he actually built a recording studio. I think it was like in a cellar or something like that, and had these artists come in and record them, and they would be pressed, locally. Maybe they would press maybe 300-400 copies of a record, but he had a ton of stuff out. And incidentally, just recently, maybe 10 years ago, there was a label called ARF, and a gentleman who owns that came through the area, knew about all this stuff. A friend of mine named Keith Semrod helped him package a series of albums with all this local material from these albums from the Kingston and the Barclay label. But because there's a wealth of information, Pat Garrett, who has the amphitheater, he's on there. He was on there he had a group called the Triumphs then, and it's just incredible. It goes on and on. The wheels keep spinning.
Yeah, and then we'll see in the tour as well. He has binders full of like the local bands, and they're like I call them the headshots, where it's like the band they're all posing, looking cool.
Oh, like 8x10.
Yeah,
we'll talk about it.
He has so much cool. Like it's just really cool to see that just the history of local music is also being carried out in this collection as well. It's fantastic. Yeah,
it's history. That's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Now you have a lot of cool promotional stuff that you've done. You've received, working at different radio stations. So you've done a whole bunch. Like a lot of the backstory of Eddie. If you want to check it out, there is another episode below where Eddie the Junior and Eddie the Third sat down. Yeah. Yes, EC3 sat down and we talked a lot. So if you definitely want to dive back into that, you can go back and look at it. But we'll try to get towards the end here so we can do the tour. But what are some things you're looking forward to in the future?
There's going to be some major projects happening. Matter of fact, about another week or two, I'll be announcing on Facebook, so watch for me. Probably one of the biggest things I've ever undertaken in my life. Mm-hmm. I've accomplished so many things, playing with bands. Matter of fact, working a lot with the Jordan Brothers. I supervised and oversaw the process of putting together their legacy room up in Frackville. So I encourage anybody who loves great old music and the legacy of the Jordan Brothers, get up there and visit it. I put it together and procured all the materials. I'm the curator of that up there. Performing, being in radio broadcasting. I host a TV show now, by the way, everybody. It's called For Your Entertainment on BCTV in Reading, Pennsylvania. We go to air on every fourth Tuesday of the month. So I've done all these things in my life.
And there also is a YouTube link we'll have below.
Yeah, right.
So if you don't have, I don't have cable television. So if you can't see it on TV, they put it back out on YouTube so you can check it out as well.
But everybody's urged me to do this major project of a lot of proportion. I gave it a lot of thought and started working on it probably about a month ago, and I'm just about ready to announce it to the public. So watch.
Yeah. Little teaser there. So follow him on Facebook. Check out all the links below. You'll see it's unbelievable. We're gonna break here very soon. Maybe one or two more questions or anything you want to get out there. But stick around afterwards and see the video of the tour. It's gonna be unbelievable.
Sure. Well, matter of fact, there's one question you asked me before we even got started. You said, Eddie, what's your favorite song of all time?
Yes, absolutely.
So, matter of fact, I'm going to let you hear a couple notes, and then we'll talk about that record for a second, all right?
Yep.
And this is how we do it. This is like we're on radio. Matter of fact, if I was really on radio, I'd take and I'd cue this up and I'd backspin it, and do it like we did it back then. But anyhow, I'll pop the needle on it, and this is how we do it, Anthony. We put a needle on a record, and we play it, okay? So here we go. This is my favorite record of all time.
Oh, we got that.
And that is Patty and the Emblems.
Oh, sorry.
That's Patty and the Emblems from Philadelphia, 1964, my favorite record of all time. And the reason that it's my favorite record of all time, when I was a young kid, 7 years old, and growing up in Philadelphia, my mom had this ugly 1949 Oldsmobile. Now, my mom didn't drive, but my Uncle Lou would take the car. He was 19. Can I have the car? Says, yeah. So he'd take the car and go out, cruising around, but he would take the kid. And I'd sit on the big mohair seats and everything. And the spring of 1964, this is one of the first songs I heard on the radio in the car, and I'll never forget it. And it has more meaning because of a couple of things. Number one, it was written by a gentleman by the name of Billy Carl. And Billy and I became very good friends. Billy had a doo-wop group called the Billy and the Essentials on Jamie Records, and later on became a part of Danny and the Juniors for 17 years. And not only that, he is the writer and producer of my last single.
Nice.
Called Spellbound, which I released in 2017. So a lot of history there. And also, this is we're going to close with this here, just to show you how much happens on a record label. We just heard the song, Mixed Up Shook Up Girl. It was written by Billy Carlucci. Now, when Billy wrote the song, he was 17 years old. He was signed to Madara and White Productions in Philadelphia, John Madara, Dave White. He was 17, but he signed a contract, and he couldn't record for nobody else or do anything else. This song here he wrote with Leon Huff, who later on became part of Gamble and Huff and the Philly Sound, the OJs, all that stuff later on. But because of Billy being so young, they couldn't put his name, and being under contract, they couldn't put his name on the record. So they put R. McGriff, a fake name, just a fake name, right? So the record comes out, and the record starts doing pretty darn well on the East Coast of Philly. I mean, they're blowing it apart. So, of course, it's selling. It's making money. And here's they used to call him Little Billy. He's 17 years old, can't get his name on the record, can't get no recognition. So finally,
he's trying to tell the ladies, and they're like, it's Army Griff.
Next thing you know, John Madara and Dave White find out about it. They're having a hissy fit. What's the kid doing? He's under contract with us, and he's moonlighting. So what they do, the record becomes so hot and so popular, they do a second pressing. Now, what happens with the second pressing is they change everything. Now, Billy gets credit for it, okay? They put his name on the B side, W. Carl, and then what happens is they add Marijoda Music to the publishing company. Now, who's Marijoda Music? Mercury Records, John Madara, and Dave White.
So they merged to work.
So they had to merge, and Billy finally got credit for the record, But nobody knows about that, And I tell them, Billy wrote mixed up, shook up girl, I said, yeah. But that's so much, you could tell, I'm so fired up, man. I love this stuff. I store it all up here. But that's how much happens on one little record label.
Yeah. One of the things, too, is you'll see in the tour is he has literally every recording of his when his old radio stations and tons and tons and tons of interviews that he's done with some amazing musicians. So hopefully he's gonna, I'm gonna put it out there so it bumps them a little bit to get it done. But
now you see, here's the other thing too. You'll learn about records. You always put them back in the sleevers, kids.
Yep. Okay. So we're gonna work on something, and if anyone here knows a process to do it easier or anything, definitely hit us up. But I want to be able to get these recordings from cassette or vinyl or anything and put it into an MP3. And I'm trying to help him create possibly his own podcast that you can tune in, and he has enough content to last years and just pop up an interview once or twice a week. And so that's
years and years plus.
Yeah, it would be amazing because he has some fantastic interviews and stuff that you should definitely hear, and he could put even this older cool stuff out. And I honestly think it would be a fantastic channel for people to tune into, and just maybe even do like this, like just record a couple minutes, like, hey, this song is, and then just hit him with your knowledge of it, and then play the interview, and then give it like, oh, this is me winning a radio contest. Like, I just think it would be a very cool channel.
The possibilities are endless. You're totally right, and I've said that so many
people
years.
Would love it.
Yeah, so many things that are archived right now that should be out in the public ear.
Yeah. Hopefully we can get the gears turned on that. And so if anyone has that process that they know, definitely let us know and put it in the comments below, or you could reach out to Eddie. His Facebook link will be there, so you can hit him up. But this guy has a wealth of knowledge. I still think you should be doing radio. I think you should figure out a way to get on. I mean, I just talked to iRock Radio. Maybe they need a DJ.
Well, you never know. That's another thing. I always say I'm looking to broaden my horizons. I'd love to get back into radio. Spine 95.3. I mean, I spent 10 years of my life in a radio. Power 106. So I'd love to get back at some point. It's not what it was.
202 siren. Just put that out there.
Okay, thank you for the let know. But I'd love to do something at some point. That would correlate with my schedule and everything else. And it's another thing that it was a part of my life. All around the walls you see up here pictures of me in the studio with the different radio stations I work with. And
you never know. Wait till you guys see this. It's gonna be fantastic. And then we're gonna also take a bunch of photos of some cool stuff. So we're gonna do a walkthrough video, and I'm gonna go back through and take some photos. But we're gonna cut to that now. But thank you so much for the sit-down interview.
Thank you, my friend.
This is a quick one here. We
rushed
rushed through
over.
it. No, we're going to we have some stuff in the works we were talking about off camera, that possibly have another interview with another guest and sit down and do something cool with that, some local music history. So there's a lot of cool stuff in the works. And if you ever need anything put to recording or anything, hit me up. We'll get it done.
So this is part one. Stay tuned, everybody. There's more to come on this show here.
Yep. We'll see you guys in a little bit.
I just wanna get off of the floor. And I just wanna get off of the floor. 'Cause I still can't sleep without medication. And I let my thoughts run wild while I still think I got one. And I care too much about my reputation. And I'm tired of sleeping on this floor. Yeah, I'm tired of sleeping on this floor.
Anthony.
Hey, what's going on, man?
Hello, my friend. You're back again.
We're here for the vault.
Or the roving camera. I guess we're going to get up here and give a tour.
All right, let me...
Alrighty. What we're going to do, we're going to start with this wall over here. As you can see, everything in this room is defined by genre. You're saying there's so many records in this room. How do you do it? What's your method of the madness? And of course, doing it for 60 years or whatever. Here's what's happening. First of all, the way the collection is devised. Up here in this top row up here, this is all doo-wop and rhythm and blues records from the 1950s. Groups that got started out like in the early 1950s, the Clovers, the Crows, people like that, the Mellow Kings, R&B artists, John Lee Hooker, anything of that nature would be up in this top row up here. From here all the way down to this row here, it's all 50s and 60s pop rock, and that could be anything right across the board. We got the Box Tops, Chicago, Bing Crosby. Any record that I have, any group, matter of fact, I have an artist that has 3 records or over, I'll automatically file. It makes it easier for me, and it's defined in this category here. And then down on the bottom, very simply, it's a group that maybe I have maybe a single record on, or 1 or 2, or something like that. And that'll go into male, female, and group, which I always categorize them with the last name. So that's how the last row goes here. Very simple, easy for me to find. I don't have anything on computer. It's all in my head. So if you ask me for a record, I'll tell you if I have it or not. So walk around this way, Anthony. Up above us as well, these are a lot of my achievements in life. Very proud of a lot of the newspaper coverage, media stuff all over the place here. Kenny Vance, who was originally with Jay and the Americans and Jay and the Planetones. That's a little effort I did with him. Kenny had some misfortune back in 2013, I believe, with Superstorm Sandy. Lost all his memorabilia. And when I was the vice president of Keystone Record Collectors, we had a nice little drive, which we called Operation Planetone. And with our members and also the people that frequented our shows in Lancaster, brought a lot of materials in that connected with Kenny. The American Hot Wax, he on the soundtrack, he supervised the music. He was the also the supervisor for the Saturday Night Live show for a long time. But Kenny Vance, a great guy. Broadcast Pioneers, I'm proud to say I'm a member of them in Philadelphia. I get down probably twice a year to do a show down there with, we call it the Rock and Roll Luncheon. We'll have people on there like Kenny Jeremiah from the Soul Survivors, the Orlons. In that picture there in the black shirts, that's the Ripcords. So it's a privilege, a pleasure to get up there and sing a couple tunes with some of my friends there. 50 Plus Life, that's a cover story that I wrote for them with the American Bandstand 60th tribute back in it would have been 2017 that happened. Keystone Record Collectors, as I mentioned, I was their vice president, and I supervised and put together about 25 meet-greet sessions with a lot of big artists, and brought them in so people would have a chance to meet them, get records signed. Danny and the Juniors were there. I had brought in Ronnie Dove, Jimmy Clanton. The names, were endless. Just a lot of great fun. Up here is the Jordan Brothers, and I had the privilege of overseeing their legacy room in Frackville, PA. If you get a chance, please check out the Jordan Brothers Legacy Room at the Frackville Museum. Their clothes are in there, their instruments, all their 21 45s they did, all the albums. And it's just a big tour of history up there for you. Once again, Broadcast Pioneers, nice shot of me at the WIBG reunion. And here's something also that it was a great time for me being in North Carolina at North Myrtle Beach, matter of fact, and being on stage with my friend Pat Gwynn there. I was a presenter at the Carolina Beach Music Awards in 2016. On the bill with us, the chairman of the board, they had the big song "Give Me Just a Little Bit of Time," and the Tams, who had a lot of hits. So very eventful. Beach Music Scene is another magazine that I was writing for down there. And up on top, we see "You Got Me Spellbound." That was my single. That was written and produced by Billy Carlucci. We had spent a lot of time in the studio, and our end result, we had the song played in 6 states, including down south. We had activity in Florida, Virginia, and the Carolinas, and a lot of fun to work with Billy. And also, back in 2017, it was the anniversary of the Summer of Love. And I had a lot of friends of mine over here, Eddie Frank from the other side, and Sterling Cook. But this is the section of records down here we had talked about. We're moving over here. This is all Garage Psych and Jimi Hendrix, people like the Vanilla Fudge. It's just endless in here. Good sections. This is all soul from the 1960s to 70s. You got Ashford and Simpson to the Intruders to the Earth, Wind and Fire, all defined, like I said before, alphabetical order. Down here, there's the Philly section, Phil Spector Records, which has a lot of great material. There were so many good groups, the Ronettes, the Crystals, Bobby Sox, and the Blue Jeans, so that's all in there. And moving over here, this is my Motown, all Motown records. We got Marvin Gaye, Mary Wells, the Supremes, Smokey Robinson, the Miracles. And also, Motown had a lot of subsidiary labels, small labels, Rare Earth, which the group Rare Earth recorded on. So there's a lot of stuff in here, single, one-shot artists and stuff like that. That's all on this side right here. These are all my antique record players. Some work and some don't. That's the way it goes.
This is the one we talked about on the show.
Yeah, we talked before. This is the 49 RCA. That's the first record player that they had for the 7-inch records. This is a 1958. Matter of fact, I have a picture back here with Dick Clark and this particular player. So that's actually reversed around. That's the back side, that's the front side. But that is the same record player you see right there. Memorabilia, some cups, WFIL in Philadelphia. My son Eddie got me that one, I believe. Here's some more RCA. These are from like the mid-50s, around 1955, 56. My brother Joe gave me this Westinghouse, which really resembles the first record player that I had, which was a Magnavox, by the way. Down here, more memorabilia, all jukeboxes and some reproduction things, which are really cool. Anything that catches my eye, I like it. Here's After Shave from Avon. You know, that's pretty cool. Bee Gees lunch can. That's wild, man. I picked it up for $1.49 when we had the Acme store down here in the Yorkville section of Pottsville. And we were talking before, Anthony, about the promotional items from the record companies. Back in the 1980s, you know, I had a lot of tight connections with all the major labels. And this was sent to me by MCA Records, The Breakfast Club. They had a big hit song called Right on Track, and Expressway to Your Heart, I think, was the follow-up. But a lot of cool stuff. You know, when you're radio, get good, you know, good goods. Dukes of Hazzard. I've got the Thermos there. 8-tracks. That's the way it was back in the day. And everybody remembers them. A couple of the 8-track players, I still have them. And they do work, by the way, matter of fact. And sliding over this way, there's just a stack of 8-tracks. But I have got probably about 300 in the cellar. So no room for them, though, you know. But this is a very prized area of mine over here that I love. This is all northeastern Pennsylvania, central Pennsylvania, local or regional artists. And this is all broken down into different sections with different areas, different groups, different record labels. Some record labels had a lot of output, so they're in here as well. And that's just right through here. There's Poison even from Harrisburg, Mechanicsburg area. Lebanon, I have records from everywhere. Four Seasons down in here. That's my Elvis bin over here. And as we sweep into here, all these whole 2 rows up here are 80s. And we've got everybody. Pseudo Echo, remember Big Hit Funky Town? The Outfield, Your Love, everything of 80s. A lot of rap stuff and anything across the board there. And by the way, all the records that are on top of here, these are all autographed. In my hallway, which you'll see later on, I've got a lot of autographs from people I work with, associated with, and stuff like that. But these are records that I don't have pictures of the people. So anytime I see somebody, I always make sure I get my records autographed. Even Maynard Ferguson, big jazz trumpeter, Sam and Dave, The Spiral Staircase, their big hit song, More Today Than Yesterday from 1969. So this is all 80s. Down in here, British rock. And as a kid growing up with the British invasion, I love British rock. The Animals, even to Elvis Costello, Joe Cocker. Matter of fact, I was looking at an interesting record before. Let's see if I can find it there.
I'm going to swing around real quick here.
But let's see if I can find that record. Something I wanted. Nevertheless, we're going to move along here. We'll find it later. It's all British rock, Tom Jones, stuff like that. The Beatles. And of course, everybody, you know, has a place in their heart for the Beatles, no matter what, you know, where you look. I have it divided into a couple different sections here. This is all solo stuff. John, Paul, George, and Ringo. Matter of fact, here's John Lennon's Instant Karma, okay? But look at the backside. There's nothing on it. That's a promotional copy so that they would only play Instant Karma. That's pretty rare in itself right there. I have all the American releases, some of the foreign things. I have, you know, when you're a completist, you've got to, you know, try to get different pressings and things like that. And I was pretty particular, you know, on getting, if I seen something that was different than what I didn't have. And just going to kind of show you something here that goes to, you know, verify what I'm talking about here. And this is the song Twist and Shout. These are all different copies of Twist and Shout. Different color pressings. And these are all in the Tolly label, the original label, as a matter of fact. That's a tall print with a black box there. Different short print. That's a bootleg, that one there. purple. Then you've got a black Tolly with a small band across it, and no box. So you've got so many different variants, and as a collector, you're always, looking out for something that you haven't seen before. So that just kind of shows you the art of collecting in that respect. Down here, it's all. Whoops! We're wrecking the joint, Ed. We're wrecking the joint.
It's a tight squeeze, everybody.
Yeah, it's tight around here, man. Excuse me, sir. These are all instrumentals. Everything from funk to rock and roll to adventures and all kinds of good things. Dwayne Eddy, they're all in this category here.
If you guys do hear weird feedback, I did realize that this microphone I'm using gets nice clicking noises around Wi-Fi, so we are pretty close to that. So I will try to edit out the best I can, just so if you hear it, that's what it is.
Thank you, Anthony. As we move on, country is our bottom line here. So the country records.
They stretch across the whole way?
Pardon?
They stretch across the whole way?
Yeah, the country, and that actually there's an addendum up on top, 2 boxes up there, and that's all the A to Z. All your old school Hank Williams, Johnny Cash, Jim Reeves, more contempt stuff. I even have Blake Shelton and a lot of newer artists that are in there because they still were making vinyl into the 90s and things like that. Basically with the country artists. A few things that are cool up here is those are Paul Revere and the Raider boots. Kinney Shoes manufactured them back in 1967. Those were my uncle's, my Uncle Lou. And God love him, he passed away, I believe, in 1997, at the age of 53. And he gave me those boots in the 1980s. And then when I went to see Paul Revere and meet him at the Schuylkill County Fair, I took the boots with me. So that's a picture of me and Paul with my grandson Billy. We've got the boot in our hand.
Oh, let's get Billy in the
Paul
shot
signed the record for me as well. And that's my Uncle Lou up there. Miss him a lot. This was Uncle Lou's shoes. These are blue suede shoes, man, from 1959. And that's the actual sales slip from J.S. Robb, which was up in the Hazleton Shopping Center in Hazleton. $12.99 was the amount there. Uncle Lou had a big foot, 11D there. And just some artifacts. Up on top, these are things I'm really happy that I did, to be in radio, the power, to be behind a microphone, and the listeners on the other side. Stations I worked at, WMIM with the great Rick Ricigliano, WHLM in Bloomsburg, that's me on the air. By the way, I was Mr. Ed back then, code name.
Mr. Ed.
Mr. Ed, yeah. Never left me. People still remember that. That's Magic 105.5 at Tamaqua. I had the Saturday Night The Oldies show up there. WHLM, we were giving away not pizzas and little things, but cars. So that was a nice thing to move on up, a little bit.
Yeah.
Giving away some, really cool things. I would take the cars, go to different remotes, locations. I remember going to MC Ray Charles at the Berwick Fair and driving the Mighty Mustang. So, cool memories, man. That's a shot from WSPI Control Room. And below, Magic 93 in Wilkes-Barre. That was a brand new station. I was on with them in the startup crew in March of 1985. So that was really, eventful. Brand new station, warm radio up there was the sister. So a lot of, cool things were happening, back then. A lot of media coverage. When I was at WHLM, myself and Bob Gale, we did an undertaking, actually, with the top 1,000 songs of all time. We call it the Final Countdown. If you remember, Europe had that song, the Final Countdown. We took a little, takeoff on it, called the Final Countdown. 4 days in a row, and we played the top 1,000 songs. We took Billboard charts, our WHLM charts, and came up with top 1,000 songs. It was so cool because people would go to sleep at night, and they set their cassette recorders so they didn't miss anything overnight. It's really cool. So that was a great, great event that we did. And some other earlier pictures back here at WHLM. My third-class radio license from when I got started, WLSH. I went on the air June 4th of 1983. It was the first day I was in radio. So I had to have a third-class license. Now, if you're in radio, you don't need none of this stuff. It's sad, But that's my third class up there. So basically, that's a run of that. We're going to take a quick sweep as we walk out of the room here. Over here, underneath the records. Well, up here we have more records over here. This is all my Rolling Stone stuff. And matter of fact, this is a pretty cool 45 here. This is the 45 of She's a Rainbow, and promotional copy, of course. Bobby V, I love Bobby. We emceed a couple of shows together. We sang on stage, and he had hits like "Take Good Care of My Baby," "Rubber Ball," and "How Many Tears." So many great records, Bobby V. Beach Boys, that's a whole bit of Beach Boys there. And then these are books. I'm a big bookworm as a kid. I wanted to learn about rock and roll, and you didn't have the internet, you didn't have the access, you read newspapers, and so you try to get anything education-wise that you could. Books were a great source, biographical books. So over the years I collected a lot of that stuff, Temptations, Ronnie Spector, Ray Charles, Les Paul. Found this, matter of fact, at a dollar store for $1. You can't beat it, man,
Ozzy's book is fantastic. I Am Ozzy. You should check that one out.
And as I was saying before in the interview, we didn't have, as far as prices, well, what's this worth? What's that worth? Price guides didn't come out until around 1977. A fellow by the name of Jerry Osborne started the whole series. And what he did was he started with a generic one where it had all different types of music in it. Then he broke it down as the years went on to a rock one, to a pop one, to a country, that kind of thing like that. But this is the record collector guides that started back then. And I think this one's from like 1980. You could see how I really used it. It's even taped up and all. But that was nice. It gave collectors an idea of a ballpark of what the records were worth, if you were selling something or buying, kind of things like that, which we didn't have for years. And, it became out in the public, sooner or later. Down on the bottom, for anybody that does not know what a 78 is, I'll give you a little education here. These are 78 RPM. And long before albums and 45s, this is what our music was on. And they were on shellac discs. So these are really rare because they stopped pressing 78s in the early part of 1959. Not everybody had the ability. They didn't have 45 RPM record changers or 33, but they could play. Some people could only play 78s. But in 1979, 59, they stopped pressing all the 78s because by that time everybody had a conventional record player in their house. But Bill Haley and the Comets I have in here. Flying Saucer, Buchanan and Goodman, great takeoff record. Ricky Nelson, it just goes on and on here. But these are 78s, and you got to watch how you store them too. A lot of people, matter of fact, I know my wife when she was growing up, her parents had a lot of 78s in their garage, and they had 13 kids, so they go out and play frisbee.
Oh.
What they did with 78s. Over here, more books. These are my smaller books that I have over here. Kind of got an overflow. I run out of room for a lot of this stuff. This is a 1962 Magnavox console stereo, and these were really big. You watch Mad Men, those TV series like that, you see a lot of the TV consoles because they had a great sound. It was furniture. It was nice. You had it in your living room, and you could play a radio. You could play some of them had a TV in it and things like that. But this was a 62. This was my Uncle Jim's. And it brings back a lot of memories because I heard a lot of songs on it for the first time. He would always have stacks of records up here. My Uncle Lou had a couple of favorites and stuff, and he'd have his one pile up here. But this is what I heard. And the thing about this is that for its time, it was probably like state of art because there was 8-inch speakers on each side where you got your bass. In the front, there were, I think there's a 4-inch and there's a smaller tweeter. So it had really big dimensional sound. At one time in West Hazelton, when my uncle was playing the record player, I'll never forget, that one of the neighbors got really antsy because the thing must have been pretty loud, called the cops. I answered the door, and there's the cop standing at the door telling them to turn the record player down. I mean, it was really funny. But that's, I keep that because it's a keepsake, and it reminds me of where I've been, totally, of, the music at the radio. Matter of fact, the radio in here is marked because when my uncle got into radio, he's working at WYNS in Lehighton. My grandmother used to like to listen to him at night. So they put a piece of tape there so she wouldn't forget where to turn the dial, There's so much more in here, gang. This is an overflow area here. There's more records down at the bottom. There's archives, newspapers, books up on tap. And probably about 6 months ago, I just started archiving the bands that I played in, starting back in the 1970s. And so I kept basically every newspaper article about the bands, our cards, flyers, every contract from every job, and I've started putting all that together kind of in an archival fashion. So that's one thing that I have in there. But that's the overflow closet in there. So over here, this is my grandmother's radio, and the memory of this is not too fond because this is the first radio that I really listened to. I was sick, and I was staying at my grandmom's house. I was in bed, and they just gave me some St. Joseph's aspirin. Okay, we had the radio on, and the radio was playing the Lion Sleeps Tonight by the Tokens. This is 1961, and the aspirins kept staring at me, and I'm thinking these were pretty good. So I went and I took some more aspirin. I didn't know they were aspirin. I thought it was candy. So I take these St. Joseph aspirin, and when my grandmother came up and found out that there's nothing in the bottle, they took me right to the hospital and pumped my stomach.
Oh.
So that's my fond remembrance of Granny's radio. So there you have it, man. But I have some CDs in here. I'm on a pack rat, on CDs when they came out. It was all clean. It was all pristine. It was all beautiful. I loved it as a musician because you could take a CD, you could listen to it, you could hear every nuance in there. You could pick out, myself. I'm a drummer by trade, but I'm a musical arranger. I listen to every instrument, and I can tell, if something's missing. If I was learning a song for practice, I knew what, if it was a minor chord, if it was a chord that maybe the guitar player didn't have, right charted out or whatever. But CDs were great, but they didn't have the punch of a 45, of being on an analog tape. Digital is cool and all that stuff. And the first CD I ever heard was Led Zeppelin. I think it was the first album. A engineer I worked with, Dale Hendricks, up at WXPX in Hazleton. This is 1984, mind you. CDs didn't really get big on the market until 86, 87. And he took me to his home. He had a couple of big Klipsch speakers, and he said, "You got to hear this." So he popped in Led Zeppelin, and I think it was Good Times, Bad Times of what the song was, because I could hear all the time, the tom work from John Bonham. But what caught me is that ba ba, I could hear the hi-hat going up and down, which I never could hear. I could hear the pedal squeaking on his bass drum pedal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this was scary stuff, man. But we knew that there was a new avenue coming. I mean, you had the vinyl, then went to cassettes. Something had to take precedence. So, the CDs, made its mark. Of course, everything runs a cycle, it comes back. But that's, basically the room. Just a couple of odds and ends up here. Some of my favorite stuff. There's a 78 up there that I actually broke. So now it's half off. So the Cadillac's up there. Speed
before we cut out of this room, show your brick off.
Oh, the brick. Okay, sure. Pink Floyd fans. Here we go. This was issued at the time of another brick in the wall, and I only realized this recently. This was given to me by Herb Gordon from Columbia Records, my Columbia rep down in Philadelphia. And as we take this out, it's actually a CD single sample, and it says "Another Brick in the Wall Part 2." Roger Waters featuring Cyndi Lauper was recorded live from the Wall concert in Berlin, July 21st, 1990, and that's exactly what's on there right there. Another Brick in the Wall Part 2 with Roger Waters and the Bleeding Heart Band with Cyndi Lauper. So this is cool stuff. I mean, that was the advantage of being a disc jockey, knowing a lot of people in, the record promotion field, knowing everybody at the labels, and they would send you certain things as perks. One final thing up here is the Pull It Beach Ball from the Monkees. That came out in 1986. I was the first disc jockey in Pennsylvania to play their song called Heart and Soul. Quick story is that I was on vacation in Atlantic City, and I came back to WHLM, and I was getting phone calls at night, from a lot of teens and stuff saying, "Eddie, Mr. Ed, can you play Heart and Soul?" I never heard about it with the Monkees, and I'm going batty because, the trade magazines, radio, MTV, nobody was on Heart and Soul. So I did some research, and I found that it was on the Rhino record label out of California, and I didn't have any contacts with Rhino at the time. After that, I had some great contacts. And I called and I talked to their national promotion director, Dave Darris, hell of a nice guy. And Dave said, "Eddie, if you get on this record," meaning that I start playing it, he says, "you're going to be the first disc jockey in Pennsylvania to play Heart and Soul." So as soon as I got the record, I played it. Heart and Soul took off. It took off well from the Pull It album. Did well for us, did well across the country. And in return, Dave said, "Eddie, you were the first to do it." And he sent me some nice things in return. And one of them was the beach ball. So that's how we got that there, promotional beach ball.
Awesome. So we'll take a quick pause here, and we'll head on into the hallway and head down that way.
Let's do it. Sounds good, man. Okay, come on, everybody. Let's go into the hallway here. Give you a little exposure here on what's going down. These pictures all up on top of here, as you're going to see coming out of here, and on the other side of the hallway as well. Very fortunate to have worked with a lot of the rock and roll performers over the year that made, some great records and great individuals and made an impact on our music. And to work on stage with them, interview them in many capacities, the way I've been with them, it's just crazy. And the pictures talk for themselves. Just been a lot of things that happened over the years, and it's all reflective of what's going down right here. People like Lou Christie, Lightning Strikes was his big song back in 1966. Tiny Tim, and he was a heck of a character. Tiptoe Through the Tulips, did a couple of interviews with him, matter of fact. And Frankie Valli, Four Seasons. Kelly Ripa, fortunate to have dinner and meet with her down in Philadelphia. She was the Person of the Year for Broadcast Pioneers in 2010. The Del Vikings, I emceed them twice at Panther Valley High School up in Lansford. A lot of pop culture stuff. Anything that catches my eye from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and it's in my hand, I've got it here. Matter of fact, remember this at all? This is before your time. Hi, Karate. Let's splash a little on here. Yeah. But that's from 1969.
Does it still have a scent?
I'm sure it does, but I won't open it up right now because I might pass out.
Yeah, it's a tight spot.
Yeah. Down here we got some old Viewmasters and stuff. These were big as a kid in the 60s and 70s. Matter of fact, I even got Michael Jackson Thriller in there right now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But a lot of mugs and cups and stuff like that. Just random things. I got some Kiss memorabilia down there.
Now, I'm not showing this on camera because just so people know, I will get photos of this. This is a tight squeeze.
Yeah, there's just so much to absorb right here.
And I'm a big dude.
Yeah. And over here there's more photos. This is like a local rock and roll section. Pictures of groups from all around the region. Ogden tonight, people from Hazleton, Harpo, out of the Danville, Bloomsburg area. Matter of fact, John Hahn, who was down from Schuylkill Haven. Johnny was with them for a while. That's Johnny up there. Hybrid Ice. Jimmy Harden and Cinch. The Boys that did Timothy. That was a record that my uncle had produced. The flip side, published it, matter of fact, with Record Music. It Feels Good. Angie's Band from Caldale. Matter of fact, I have a stand-up up here out of Angie. Wazoo's from Wilkes-Barre. So we're going to move around down this way here. And, of course, more pictures. The Jordan Brothers, another big tribute to them there. Big ad out of Billboard magazine from 1960. For the Things I Didn't Say, which was on Jamie Records, probably their biggest selling record. I think I went to number 43 in the country. Caravan of Stores tour, which featured the Jordan Brothers back in 1959. So just, a wealth of performers over the years here. And I've kind of run out of room, so matter of fact, I have room for one more.
I thought I was going down. I don't know. It's getting a little bit of pop culture stuff.
Uh-huh.
Had a little shaky there. I thought I was going down.
Man, so watch out. Coming up to the Beatles, got to get the Beatles, in there. And these are chew bops. This is kind of funny. Back in the early 1980s, they came out with these, and it was like replicas of the old albums, and they put bubble gum in them. And what would happen, in my case, was that my kids would come home from school and take the bubble gum. But they thought I didn't know anything about it. They sliced the shrink wrap so pristine here. It's nice. But nevertheless, that's okay, Keith and Carrie. I love you still.
They stole all of his bubble gum.
Yeah, they stole my
bubble gum.
But
actually,
they didn't get my bubblegum Elvis cards here. These are from 1977. A friend of mine, Spencer Smith, who passed away some years ago, guitar player up in the Wilkes-Barre area. Me and Spencer were very tight since I was a kid, about 15 years old. Before Elvis died in August of 77, he had sent away to Nashville for a whole case of these cards and actually gave me one box of them. They've never been open inside. Bubblegum's still in them. Yeah.
Did the bubblegum on the vinyls have the picture of the vinyl, or did it have had the was it that
no,
detailed?
It was just a dummy bubblegum.
Yeah,
just a pressed bubblegum. I think it had grooves in it, make it look like a record, kind of thing like that. But some Presley stuff down there, tracks and dolls and cards and different things. Books, Elvis book from 1957.
Cologne?
Yeah. And Beatles across the board here. Actually, when these came out, these are pretty cool. I believe they came out in the early 1990s, and I just had to have them because they were so great, on display, things like that. Over the years, some of the glasses I picked up, a couple lunch boxes in between. My grandson, Ben, got me this when he was in England a few years back. And gave that to me. I thought it was so nice. I said, you got to bring me something back from England of the Beatles. So that's what he brought me back. on the Yellow Submarine. This is a miniature lunchbox. My daughter Carrie had picked it up a few years ago. So I thought it was so cool because I have the original thermos from 1965. And my son Keith had found this. We were coming back from Schnecksville, PA. I emceed a show with Danny and the Juniors. And we were at an antique show walking around. And I was, mainly looking for records. And Keith comes up. He says, "Dad, look what I found." And he shows me this. And went to the counter. It was a quarter. And honest to God, it's usually broken, shattered inside and everything, but it's perfect condition.
Oh my God!
And really glad that I have it. So now I got to find the lunchbox. I wish I could find that.
I love it. It has the
violin
bass.
Little odds and ends down here. Back in around 64, 65, they were coming out with so much memorabilia, or so much memorabilia, whatever you want to call it at the time, merchandising, and we call it swag today. Of course. But this was the Beatles' diary, and I think it goes probably about for $15-20 now on the market. But that's the original one. It's never been written in, matter of fact, and that was given to me by a personal friend of mine some years ago on there. But
we'll get pictures of all these shelvings.
Yeah, that'll be nice. Sure. Spinning Around 2, of course, this is one of the greatest rock and roll movies of all time. If you follow old school rock, this was the movie. It kind of told it all. Story about a couple of young kids right after the boom of the Beatles want to form a band. They get pretty decent. They go in and make a record. They get a manager, and they get even better. And the pitfalls of what happens, during that, that time. And it was a great movie. Hanks produced it. He was in it. And this came out of Haddesty's Hardware. After I guess they were doing a promotion on it. I said, "Are you going to throw it away?" And they said, "Yeah." So I said, "I will take it." And that's how I got this here, which I like.
Got my favorite, Liv Tyler, in there.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, Angie Bokiko, Angie and the Citations. This is a stand-up of Angie. And he had the group called the Citations. They had a few records out. Dancer by Me and Salt and Pepper in 1964 on the Angela label. Later on, he had the group Angie's Band, very well known in the area. And he passed away from cancer in the 1990s. A lot of my friends wanted to get together and honor him in a certain way. So what we did is we decided to have a big show at Nardini's Catering Hall in Lansford back in 1999. I was on the committee with it and emceed the show. And at the end of the night, it was I think it was 800 people. It was incredible, the people that came out. His original band members were there and everything. We had every person that performed on the show, all the musicians, sign it. Naturally, a lot of the members are deceased right now. A lot of my friends are on here that are gone. But that was, Angie Bokiko. And at the end of the night, when we were doing his hit song, Dancer by Me, we brought the stand-up out in the middle of the stage. It was really, really nice. A nice way to, finalize the show and remember Angie's memory, too. That's my Uncle Jim's guitar. I love it, man. I'll never know if it's a Silvertone or a K, because there was a couple companies that were manufacturing for different people back then, and it could be a K or a Silvertone. I started to research it, but never, fully finished it. But that's the guitar, so cool, that aqua blue from the late 50s and the white knobs, almost like a Richie Valens type of guitar. And even that's a newspaper ad when my uncle was doing some, we call it mobile DJ work now. And they did the same things back in the early 60s and just, they call it, DJ or hot record hop is what it, basically was. You brought the records, the kids danced, and maybe a group came and they would lip sync. But he did a show at O'Leary's in 1963. And he brought in Dean Christie. Dean was from Philadelphia. His picture's right there. I met him a few years ago, had him sign it, and he had some great records, but they never, hit the national chart. So that's about what's happening on that side. And over here, we're just kind of moving on with stuff. 1980s, the Hair Days, the MTV, till Tuesdays over here, and Amy Mann came into town to Bloomsbury, had her sign that for us at the radio station. Bobby V. I was always a big Bobby V fan, and in 1991 had the opportunity to work with him on stage and also sing with him. And great guy. He passed away from Alzheimer's just a few years ago. The Drifters, of course, I toured with them in 1978. I was their musical director and drummer. So there's a lot of history, with the Drifters. Up on top, Herman's Hermits. That's actually the first record I bought that I physically went into a store. I had a shoe shine route in Philadelphia, and never forget, because I was collecting records at the time. We've been talking about, but that was the first time I bought a record, and I went to a hardware store. It was 49 cents, and you could tell if you look at the insert, I used to put those little metal, actually plastic spindles. We had, I think it was a metal one that I had used in there, and the inside of the record is kind of a little rough there. It's kind of notched out. But that's my copy of Can't You Hear My Heartbeat. And I had the original guitar player Leckenby and drummer Barry Whitwam sign them when I met them at the Woodlands in Wilkes-Barre back in, I think it was like 1984 or 85. But that's Whitman and also Leckenby up there. Elvis, it's Eddie Rabbitt. That's a picture of myself with Eddie Rabbitt backstage at the Berwick Fair. Eddie came in to do a concert, and since I knew that he had written Suspicious Minds for Elvis, I thought it'd be a nice gesture to take it with me and have him sign it. So what he put on was the inscription to Eddie, "You got the last copy. Thanks, Eddie Rabbitt." Of course, Chubby Checker. I loved Chubby's records for years, and oddly enough, in 2015 I was called, given the opportunity to go out and tour with Chubby as his drummer. And his bass player at the time, the tour manager, Jeff Troy, called me, given the opportunity. I met with Chubby. I couldn't take it because of a lot of different things that are happening in my life. But it was so nice to sit with Chubby on his tour bus and talk about the possibilities. And so Chubby said, "You can't come with us?" And I said, "No, Chubby, I'm sorry, man." But those are the things that happen in life. Another great artist that I was involved with was a couple of the guys from Sha Na Na. Matter of fact, Denny Green. Matter of fact, that was taken in Kansas City, Kansas. I was on tour with the Drifters, and I happened to walk into a bookstore, and I was looking for a brand new record price guide, and a couple of the fellows said, "Hey, the guy from Sha Na Na's in the bookstore." And I said, "You're kidding, man." So I walked in, and there was Denny Green, and we got talking. He was in town doing a show with Dr. Hook, and I later caught up with Bowser. Those are the Del Vikings over here. Loved working with them. Hell of a nice guys. They did Come Go With Me and Whispering Bells and so many hit records. Dupree's, I've worked with them a number of times. I'll be seeing them again in March. And, this is one of the greatest records of all time. Talk about rock and roll that says it all. American Pie by Don McLean. Everybody knows the song. I don't care if it's a 7-minute song. I'll listen to it again. But, for the time when it came out in 1970, into 71, 72, the lyrics, just hit home. You're talking about, the Byrds and Buddy Holly and the Beatles, and it was just incredible. He really said it and did it well in a song. So I'm going to kind of stroll down just a little bit through the hallway. There's more coming up down here.
This is my favorite here.
Yeah, just be careful. Watch yourself here.
Your Bigfoot here. Your Bigfoot, your chipmunks.
As you're walking down, this is kind of the drummer's wall to the right. As I always had to defend me for the drummers that I liked hearing on the records and, talking with them and their techniques and stuff like that. And, getting to, to meet them is just a thrill. And some of the people here. Simon Kirk from Bad Company, Liberty DeVito. That's me with Liberty DeVito at Dale's Drum Shop down in Harrisburg. My daughter Carrie was finalizing her endorsement with Trick Drums. And it just so happened that Liberty was down there that day too. And it was a pretty nice day because when Liberty was there, he got up and performed for a little bit. There was a couple of local guys, bass player and a guitar player, that got up to jam a bit. And then he had talked to Carrie a bit before the show and the drum clinic. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, Liberty goes, "Carrie, you want to come up here and play for a while?" So Carrie went up, and Liberty DeVito came off the stage. So it was really neat. He patted me on the back. He says, "Eddie," he says, "Man," he said, "she's great." And I says, "Yeah, she is great." So. It was cool, to be, with Liberty DeVito, one of the greatest drummers of all time. Billy Joel, all the big hits, he was on them all, Pete Best, the original drummer for the Beatles, and not many people associate him. They always think Ringo. But from 1960 to 62, Pete Best was the drummer of the Beatles. And it was just a misfortune when they got signed in 1962. And the producer, George Martin, thought that Pete. There was different variations of the story. I'm not even going to go down memory lane because there's too much stuff there. There was a question about his playing ability. Then there was questions that he was upstaging Paul McCartney because he looked so good. The girls liked him. So there's a bunch of myriad of things why Pete Best was bounced from the group. But Pete was there for 2 years. I got to meet him some years ago. Very nice gentleman with no animosity and. Did well on his own after all these years, so I'm glad to have his signature. The fellows from Vanilla Fudge, very inspirational. My drumming was Carmen Apiece, who also played with King Cobra. and so many different groups. Rod Stewart, he wrote, as a matter of fact, Carmine wrote with Rod, Do You Think I'm Sexy? That's myself and Kerry, and also A.J. Perro from Twisted Sister, all playing drums together at Dale's Drum Shop in Harrisburg, where A.J. was there doing a clinic for, I forget what drum company, Mapex might have been or something like that. But it was nice to see him, and he jumped up to us and invited us to their concert at the Electric Factory. They were doing a benefit for their sound man who had cancer, and invited us to go to the Electric Factory. And it was so great because myself and my family, we were the only ones allowed backstage. Nobody else could go back. So it was nice because we were able to watch the show from back there, come out, scoot out, and they treated us very, very nice. And it was a great show. And of course, AJ's no longer with us. God love him. But just kind of walking down here and glancing at what's happening here. A lot of concert posters from the 1960s, 70s. A lot of favorites of mine. The one in the middle, my Uncle Jim had emceed that particular show, Three Dog Night, 1971. I couldn't get there. I had a show myself at the Hazleton Philharmonic, so I couldn't witness Three Dog Night. I loved Floyd Sneed's drumming all those years. But anyhow, there's the set list on top, and the ticket from the show, and also the manager's card inside of there too as well. Three Dog Night, Grand Funk at the Paramount Theater in Wilkes-Barre. That was given to me, and I can't remember the circumstances on that, but that was produced by my friend Joe Nardone, who's like the premier concert promoter in Wilkes-Barre, Scranton. He's still doing it all and does a superb job. One really swift thing up on top here is, and I don't think you're going to be able to get it, but anyhow, in the corner, when the movie Woodstock came out, I was 12 years old. Well, when Woodstock itself came out, the festival in Bethel, New York, I couldn't go. I was 12 years old, of course, 12-year-old kid. But when the movie came out the following year, I couldn't go to the movie either. My mom forbid me. So in retaliation, and a lot of us older people remember head shops. We had a head shop on Watling Street in Hazleton. And I went down there, and I walk in, it's all dimly lit and everything. And I seen these iron-on transfers, okay? And I seen Woodstock. That's it, man. My mom is not going to knock this one. I went home, I ironed it on my T-shirt. She couldn't say nothing, man, So that was the original T-shirt from when I was, 14. And I cut it was pretty tattered and all, so I just cut the inside out with the design on it. But I always keep it as a memory. So when Woodstock always comes around, that's what I think about, wearing that T-shirt symbol, hey, I'm rocking, Richie Havens and Big Brother and all that. I couldn't be there, but I will celebrate, And some oddball bumper stickers down here, Rolling Stones from 1981. Another concert poster, Bread from Hazleton. We had a lot of great concerts that came to St. Joseph's Gym up there. I went to see Raspberries when they came out, and with Eric Carmen and all that at the St. Joe's Gym. There's some other artists which I can't remember right now, but David Gates and Bread being up there. So that kind of wraps up what we have happening here in the hallway, and hope you enjoyed that tour. Well, here we go, part 3 of the Vinyl Vault experience. Hope you guys are enjoying this. It might be lengthy, so grab a coffee. We still have more time to go here. We're going to sweep around. We're in what I say it's the album room, my album collection. There's also some pop culture in here and some other artifacts which I'll talk about. You'll probably look here and say, wow, you got a hell of a lot of 45s, but albums, there's too much. I was never really the album collector. I don't know if there's a reason for that. 45s were my passion, but still a substantial amount of albums. But what I liked about, albums, you could pick them up. They're beautiful covers. I mean, Anthony and I were talking about this earlier in his interview, that they were very attractive. And the record companies did that for a reason, because, if you walk into a supermarket, and this is sitting up here like that, it's going to pull your eye. So the more colors, the more vibrancy, to the packaging, or something that's going to lure the eye. That was, the great thing about albums. Matter of fact, and the thing is, too, there's so many different variants. And when we get into pressings, you have mono, monaural, and stereo. And as time went on, the monaural pressings seemed to be, it depended upon the record. Who would want, if it was Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys, well, the mono is going to be a more expensive record to find, and some people want to have both copies or whatever. But one favorite record album cover of mine, we're talking about the album covers. I'm going to show you this one right over here. It's by a gentleman by the name of Frankie Lane. Now, Frankie Lane was what I call one of those pop crooners back in the 1950s. He did songs like Rawhide, Jezebel, and a couple of big Moonlight Gambler and all. But Mercury Records put out, or Columbia rather, when he went to Columbia later, they put out this album called Frankie Lane Rockin'. Now look at this. Is he rocking? No.
Trying to get that glare out of there.
He's not rocking at all. But the album cover is so cool. You know, it's got all the elements. It's got the 1950s. It's got the the hand gesture thing happening. But rocking, let's flip it over. Let's see what he's doing on this album. That's my desire. That lucky old sun. Baby, that ain't right. On the sunny side of the street. These are all songs that were like show tunes and stuff from like the 40s. The only thing that signifies that he's rocking is he's doing a song called Rockin' Chair. But look at this. There's liner notes on it. It tells a story about Frankie Lane. It tells us some of the the albums that you can get by him. These were the beauty features of of an album, because you had so much things were happening there. You also had packaging. A lot of Beatle albums where if you open up the white album, the 8x10 glossies of every Beatle was in there. There's posters, but there was a way of packaging that made it so great. Anything. Here's Ray Charles. Look at that beautiful picture, man. It's so super, But I like all types of music, as you can see. Certain artists I'm very big on, and of course, like anybody else, and I love my Beach Boys. I have records by the Byrds here. We got Tony Bennett back there. The Archies. That's a box set by the Archies. Kind of flying around here. There's another cool album cover too. Matter of fact, Chuck Berry. This is great. One of his early ones. 1 Dozen Berries. Look at that. Ain't that sweet?
What album is My Ding-a-Ling on?
That was on the from London to here it is right here. Yeah, the London Chuck Berry
that's a great
sessions.
album cover.
Yeah, isn't it? 1972, and it's the only #1 record he ever had. It was originally called My Matter of fact, My Tambourine. Nobody knows about this. Don't tell anybody, okay?
All right.
I told you. I didn't realize this. I had gotten this album when it came out in 1972 through Columbia House. A friend of mine had set me up with Columbia House. Paid $10. My mom was really adamant. She didn't want me to, give me $10, to go sign up with Columbia House. Yeah, Mom, they're going to give me 10 free albums, I got Chuck Berry and a bunch of them, But anyhow, a couple of years later, I was shopping. I think I was just hanging out with my mom and I was in McCrory's in Hazleton, PA, and I found this other Chuck Berry album. And I look at it, St. Louis to Frisco. That's a pretty cool cover. Let me see what songs are on it. Do I know any of them? Here, I go home and I play it. My Tambourine is the same thing as My Ding-a-Ling. So apparently, Chuck had cut this in 1967, and the song My Tambourine, he just put new lyrics to it. So his own song, but he made a #1 record. You think about all the songs, Johnny Be Good, Sweet Little 16.
I love Johnny Be Good.
Exactly, but they were never #1, But doo-wop stuff. Here's a later doo-wop record. You Can Tell Me Goodbye by the Casinos, 1967. Incredible record. One of the first Bob Dylan albums. Freewheel and Bob Dylan. Four Seasons. The Guess Who. I love the Guess Who. I've matter of fact emceed them.
Wearing the shirt
with the original. Yeah, I love the Guess Who. Original bass player Jim Cale. I emceed them at the Alley back in 1984, and over the summer, their original drummer Gary Peterson. Gary is the one that owns the name now, so they had played at the Univest down in Quakertown. Good friend of mine is Charlie Davis from Paradise Artist out in California, and Charlie took me backstage to meet him and all, so I love the Guess Who. That's one of my favorite groups of all time. Iron Butterfly, what can we say? And I got it, Davida, baby. Don't you know that I love you? in the Garden of Eden, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right. You know all about that story, so I'll have to go back through that. So this is basically set up as you kind of see sweeping around. It's A to Z up here, all multi-genres and stuff. When you go down in here, all on the bottom, that's all the 1980s. That's all my 80s albums, all kinds of stuff going down in here. Let's see here. We got again Pepsi and Shirley. Hey, Springsteen. I got a lot of Springsteen stuff in here. John Cougar Mellencamp.
Oh, sorry.
So it's just a wide array of what was happening back in the 80s. Also, on top of my shelves down here in the bottom, and this is this is probably my heart and soul. These are all my what I call air checks from radio. When I was at radio, I always made sure that I taped myself for critique and also for memory purposes too. These are all the radio stations that I worked at: WMGH, HLM, Magic 105.5, and XPX. Those are all my radio shows going all the way down. Then the Rocket 88s. I've got 2 bins of tapes over there because we were still in an audio age back then, so I would use a lot of cassette tapes. I had a 4-track recorder, and we would do the group that way too. And on the other side as well, I have some cassettes of local acts and different things. Sweeping around this way, instrumentals. I love a lot of the old instrumentals, as I said before. Adventures Link Ray, Dwayne Eddy, the Chantays, anything instrumental I love. Going down this way, it's all British rock. Rolling Stones, Pink Floyd. Let's see what we got here. Donovan, who was a big folk singer back in the 1960s. Hurdy-Gurdy Man, matter of fact, which had a couple of Led Zeppelin's players on there. See what else we have happening here, down here. Elton John, I've got tons of his stuff. And Kinks, that was one of my favorite groups as well. Let's see what we got. Pink Floyd, Rolling Stones down here. And it's one of my favorite album covers too as well. Early Rolling Stones. December's Children. And more British rock. Then we get into the Beatles down here. And of course, being passionate about the Beatles, have a lot of stuff. And this just kind of shows you that there's different pressings, and this is the original album. A lot of people think Meet the Beatles was the first album released in America by the Beatles. It wasn't. It was Introducing the Beatles. And this was released on January 10th of 1964. Meet the Beatles came out 10 days later. And because BJ Records had the rights, which is a long story in itself, they had put this out as soon as all the Beatlemania went crazy right after the brand new year of 1964. But that's the original press. Then you have a bootleg. This came out in the early 70s. These were circulating all over the place. And that's what they were for $1.
How would you catch the bootleg?
How would you check? There's a difference in the pressings. I can take and show you this here real quick. The first album has what's called a multicolored band on it. This one doesn't even have a sleever, a white, normally a generic white sleever.
Yeah. And
on top of that fact, the label is black. That's a bootleg.
Would it sound different?
Of course, there's going to be some substantial sound difference, but it's packaging and everything else, and you could tell these are very clear. The original was not. The original's a little faded as well. And then there was another variant on the bootleg as well, with the stereophonic banner. Well, I think that's basically about the same version. This one is different because it's got a brown band around the whole front.
And they jacked it up $1.
So, but that's the joy of collecting, is that there's always a piece to the puzzle. And you never have everything. There's so many. You'll never have every record. I mean, you have to realize that as a collector, at some point, you either get focused into certain areas and just stay with what you're doing because it's just too overwhelming. Especially with Beatles and stuff. There's so many things out there when the Beatles came out. Matter of fact, this is kind of funny. Everybody was jumping on the bandwagon with the Beatles, and they would take and have other groups go record their songs, issue them like this. They would put fake faces on there, Beatlemania. Now, if you're at a supermarket, you see that. Oh, Mom, can I have this? It's the Beatles. It's not the Beatles. There's so many albums that were packaged this way, but they're collector's items.
Yeah,
they are, because to hear some of those songs and the way that they're done, you laugh your butt off sometimes, but it's serious stuff. It was really cool. But the fact of the matter with this particular album here, a number of the songs were done by the Dovells, and the Dovells were known for the hits Bristol Stop, Holly Golly Baby, You Can't Sit Down. And I talked with them at Leichter one time, and they said, I can't believe you know about the Beatlemania album. I said, yeah, you guys did a couple of the tracks, But that's the part of collectors and our intuition to find out, to be like Sherlock Holmes and go behind the scenes and get, find all the info about these records and people that were involved with them. But that's some of the cool stuff on the Beatles there.
Cheap Trick does a really good Beatles. Didn't they do the whole one album, Sgt. Pepper?
Yeah, I think they did some. Yeah, exactly. I think they did, and there was a number of artists that did a lot of stuff like that, or takeoffs or sound offs. I put up a post on Facebook a couple of weeks ago about what was the top 20, my top 20 countdown of my favorite albums of all time, and one happened to be Todd Rundgren and Utopia. I think I might have that album here. Let's see if I have a clip here. I think it's one of my Beatles albums. But anyhow, Utopia, they recreated the sound of the Beatles, but did all original songs, just like the Ruddles type of thing. Pretty creative. So the Beatles influences, was always out there. And as we strip along here, this is all sheet music from 1950s, 60s, 70s. Of course, if you were a kid, you were playing piano or you wanted to learn a song, sheet music was always the answer, but not the true answer. A lot of the chords might not be right and things like that, but nevertheless, it was a good gauge to work with.
Speaking of snappy hand gestures
in the photo. Oh, you're looking at all my stuff from the Rocket 88s, man. This is kind of a wall with some of the bands, a good, handful of the bands I worked with over the years, mainly a lot of the things for the Rocket 88s, because in 14 years, we had a lot of media press. So, I want to get that up on my walls, representative of the things that I've done, and the changes too. Naturally that's Keith over there on the drums. 1996 that would have been. Fat Robbie, gotta love him, he's in rock and roll heaven. With Slick Johnny. So that was our lineup there. Squeak back there. Mike Malewski. Tommy Grice over there. And Rocket 88s again. Another lineup. Louis Jordan from the Jordan Brothers. Myself. Joe Riley from Allentown. And Robbie and John. And then another lineup. That was when Carrie came in with us. She was 21 then. And Trixie. That's Kathy Rim. Kathy plays with, I forget the name of her group now. It's Cats 22 or something like that. Kim Sherman, playing a lot of local bands. He worked with me and Sheriff Jones. And another different shot with myself and Keith. That was 1997 as well, I think. 7 or 8, yeah.
The hair on Keith.
Yeah, look at that, man. Yeah.
And
look at the hair on this kid. Now it's low maintenance, Nice write-ups. Jack Culp, our good friend, who's with, he played with Sterling Cuck for a long time and had harmonica and whatnot. He had this newspaper called The Scene, so he did that interview on us. That was when I was a golden age of rock and roll, 9-piece show band. That was a feature on us in the news item. Here's one done on local rock and roll that featured myself back in 1991. And going up on the top of the far wall, here we got a lot of the bands I played with on the road. Midnight Sensation, that was 1980. The fellow on the top with the glasses, that was John Daly. John, when he left our group, he went with Carl Wilson from the Beach Boys, and I saw him on American Bandstand playing, actually. It was kind of weird, Which one's that?
Rough Boy.
Rough Boy, yeah. That's myself. And
that is Eddie right there. Like that looks like the third right
now. You like that?
With the mustache, when he grows his mustache out?
My boy's got a little of that look, huh?
That looks just like, they're twins at that photo.
That was 1980. On top of that is Ed Moran, and that's the gentleman that plays bass and sings with us with Three's a Crowd right now.
Yeah, that's eerie right there.
On the bottom is Kenny Staller. Kenny was with the Other Side in Tazi for a long time. He lives in Florida now. Rocket 88s, that's another version with Kathy, Rim, Carrie, and Marcus Angelo Sandy, rather. Sorry, we're from Palo Alto. The Mud Flaps, I was with them twice. Once was in 1977 when I came up in the Drifters, and later on, 1981 to 83. Fat Cats, Jimmy Duranis up there, and Billy Lindenmuth. That was pretty cool. I never worked with a trio before, and I always have goals, and when we were putting together a blues band, we're calling it the Mojo Dogs, and Keith was working with the Fat Cats, and he had some things come up with him with work and his schedule and stuff like that, so he couldn't play, and Jimmy called me one day, he says, Eddie, you want to be a Fat Cat? And so I started that weekend. So I went over to play with the blues band, and an hour later I was rehearsing the tunes for the Fat Cats, so nice. That's how it goes,
Let's dive into your local history here.
Okay.
So we
have up here, these are all 8x10s, as I said before. These are all glossies, like from the record companies, promotional, management, stuff like that. But I also have a local section, a regional section. So maybe this will bring back some memories for some people that know some of these artists that are in my files here, of course. Maybe the artists will be looking for these pictures, too. You better watch out. But a lot of local bands and stuff like that. Let's start back here. I'm going to look at our area down here in Pottsville. Here we go. State of Shock. Some gentlemen we all know, Eric Zygmunt, now at Sapphire, and Joey Ciravella. Joey played with a lot of bands, and he was out on the road for a long time too. Nicole Ginn speaks for itself. Oh Ruby, that's Todd Sterner. Todd used to be with Psycho Betty with Keith, and now he plays with Hooligan with Keith as well. And let's see what else we have here. Grantville Station, that was a country band. Kim Sherman, guitar. Mark Grant on drums. Can't remember. Brian Crummas, as a matter of fact. And Shanghai, we know some of those people there too. Michelle, we know, I think that's Eric. Matter of fact, it looks like him. I'm not sure. But anyhow, Eddie Hoffman, I know that for sure. Babyface from up in the Hazleton area. I mean, look at that. That's the glam, the 80s, But I have tons of that stuff. And there's one more. We'll do it. This will be the last one here. Twin Hedges. And what a great picture, huh? Albie and Harry Schumann. I mean,
looking like Slash.
Yeah. That's just cool stuff. And I know Keith, and back in his high school days, him and Chris Kurtz, they'd go up, and watch these guys practice in Steel Rose and Trim Hedges. These were the big boys, And I'll never forget, Trim Hedges was headlining, and they gave Pyramix the opener out here in, I think it was Forestville, at the fire company. And Keith went and set up and everything, and started checking his bass drum out, and Albie goes, look at that rabbit foot on that kid. So from that point on, Keith was always known as Rabbit Foot. Yeah. So that's, some of the stuff up here. Press kits, the record companies were notorious for sending a lot of that stuff out. Fortunately, I still have a lot of those things, even like Curtis Mayfield. There's a picture of Curtis. There's the buyout from the record company, Buddha Records.
That's an Amazing Spider-Man one.
Yeah. So that's, look at that, But these are things that you don't see too often, kind of rare items as far as...
What is the Spider-Man thing? Is that a press release?
Pardon?
The Spider-Man.
Well, let's take a look at it. It's...
Because we have a lot of nerds on our, especially me.
That's actually, the world of Stan Lee. And they go into a little depth about Stan's background and things like that. It's just the other part of the vinyl there. But,
so this is what you were supposed to read on the station?
Actually, this was like promotional stuff. Maybe Stan would be coming to town or something like that, and they wanted to get a jump in the newspaper.
That's
or maybe,
awesome.
Have an interview, and so they would send us stuff out. Or if it was a record they were promoting, they would do that ahead of time too. Let me show you one thing up here. It's a cool backstory. As I used to get records.
I'm gonna come on this side here.
As I said before, my uncle had, some of the most incredible connections in the recording industry. Like knew everybody. And every contact. I would walk home when I was like in, I guess, 7th grade, 8th grade, grew up in West Hazleton. I would walk by my grandmother's house and look at the step. And on the step would be all these mailers from all these record companies. I mean, it was like incredible. So the contacts, and that's why when I got this business, I decided to be the same way, to be aggressive, get to know everybody. And, it all benefits you in so many ways. And I used to make road trips to New York with my uncle. And we would go to the record companies. I mean, believe it or not, it was like a field day. So we would go to Bell Records. I'd sit there, and there's all the gold records up on the wall, the Letter by the Box Tops. There's the Delphonics. We go to Laurie Records. And in one in particular, we made a trip to Buddha Records. At the time, Buddha was the big powerhouse of the bubblegum sound, the Ohio Express, the 1910 Fruit Gum Company. They just had a wealth of artists on that bubblegum sound at the time. And I was standing there, my uncle was talking to Cecil Holmes. He was the National Promotion Director. And I didn't have a copy of the 45, Simon Says. There we go again, Eddie and his 45s. So I said to Cecil, I said, Mr. Holmes, do you have a copy of the 45 of Simon Says? He says, no, Eddie, I'm all out. He said, but would you take an album? So I said, well, sure, I'll take an album, right? So this album was given to me on... June 24th, 1968, I stamped it there, matter of fact, which I never do. I always would write inside the white sleeve, but I don't know why I did that. But anyhow, I never met any of the guys from the 1910 Fruit Gum Company. So probably about 4 or 5 years ago, the 1910 Fruit Gum Company, the only original member right now is Frank Jekyll, who is the guitar player. They were performing in Hazleton, so I went to catch the show. And I told Frank the whole story that I just told you. He was laughing his head off. And I said, by the way, Frank, I said, after all these years, would you mind signing this for me? So, that's how I operated. I was getting records, even from the record companies, whatever it took. But that's about the basis of what is in this room here. Pop culture stuff, real quick on top of here. Very top is CDs. That's a lot of my CD library up there. And stuff that I enjoy, I still play today, things like that. Record-matic, you could put your records in. Matter of fact, I just got this like a couple of months ago. Somebody gave it to me. You could put your records in there and select. You press a button, and I guess you select what record you want to listen to. It's just like a funny kind of stand. But the things up here, some of them do hold some meaning. This is a 1953 Corvette. When the Corvette was introduced, Ideal made a model off of that, design and everything, and the headlights on it actually worked. That was my Uncle Lou's, and he gave it to me many years ago. I still have the original box back there. I was big into model cars. I started building them in 1964, and my uncle, matter of fact, that's one that he had built. I had watched him build it. Can you believe it or not? And I still have it, I loved building them as a kid. I would every weekend I'd buy a ton of models. 1964 through 69, I was really building a lot. And then during the years, last 20 years, whatever, I get a little bug. I go buy a model kit. A couple of my built. I built that some years ago. That's an Edsel and Mobile Gas Company. My dad worked for, so I've got this model, this replica years ago. This is my original tanker, matter of fact, from 1961. I don't know what happened. Well, this is the end of it. I don't have the original head, the tanker, though. But that's Noble Gas 1961. It's mine. And down here, it's really hard to see, but I'm going to bring it out. This is my Matty Mattel doll from 1963. Matty Mattel was made by the Mattel Toy Company, and they did them for, I think it was 2 years, 62 and 63. This is 63, I believe. And it had a string in the back, which you can see is no longer there. I think it was over here, and you pull him and he would talk, And there's my writing in the back. Yeah. Collins.
You got to write your name on everything.
Yeah, whatever. I got to write on everything, man. I took this when I went to get my, how you're a kid, you're a young kid, and you have your doll, you have something, that you cherish, you're going somewhere, and it's always with you. Well, this went with me when I got my tonsils out. In 63 when I was 6. So, hiya, Matty. Hello. I put him back here. But he's missing his clothes. I'm sorry about that. Excuse me. Family show I know we're having here. And anything pop culture, I love this stuff. This actually was a doll, G.I. Joe, that Carrie had sent, and I think it was for Eddie. I think she had sent it. Carrie was in the Army many years ago. Long story on that. But she had sent that to Eddie, and I thought that was a nice, remembrance there. So, but anything related to, the old days, I just love old school charm.
More books.
Yeah. The 50s, 60s, and 70s. It just had an aura, a place and time, a very peaceful time, a very great time to grow up as a kid. There was a lot of adventure. You could walk the streets. You could do things that you wouldn't normally do now, or you wouldn't even want your kids to go outside. It's a shame. Because totally different world we live in, but I'm glad I've experienced it all.
Well, thank you so much for having us at the tour here. It's fantastic. I got a cool little thing. It's a little Model N Beetle. I'll send over to you next time I see you.
Oh, you're the greatest.
We'll bring you up.
I'll take that.
Yeah. So this has been the tour. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We're gonna snap some pictures of everything. Follow us over at IwEP Network on Facebook and Interviews with Everyday People, as well as on Instagram, and you'll see all the photos of everything here.